Good afternoon. This is Kevin Askew, Director of Sales at TechXtend. I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar using CA ERwin R8 Design Layers. This is another webinar in our free webinar series, Maximizing Data Quality for Value and ROI. Today's agenda will include a brief overview on TechXtend, then the webinar using CA ERwin R8 Design Layers by Victor Rodrigues, Data Management and Data Warehousing Consultant here at TechXtend, followed by a question and answers period and a summary. TechXtend is a leading e-seller of developer and infrastructure tools. It can be found on the web at www.techextend.com. ERwin falls under our database worldview ecosystem. We are an elite CA partner and the #1 data modeling reseller in North America. We also have a dedicated CA sales and engineering team on staff, focusing on database modeling and infrastructure design and training services. We are a leader in delivery of CA education and an authorized VET VSA partner. Under our database worldview, we provide industry-leading tools for your end-to-end development needs, including defining, designing, developing, testing, deploying, and managing. Before I turn things over to Victor, I want to announce some exciting news. As of this morning, TechXtend has finalized a partnership agreement with TIBCO Software. TIBCO Software Suite is a leader in the MDM, BPM, and enterprise integration space. With TIBCO, you can elevate your value to your organization by seamlessly integrating your applications and enabling your business to make better decisions with real-time data. You'll hear more about TIBCO in the upcoming months from the TechXtend side. But without any further ado, I now want to turn things over to Victor for the ERwin R8 Design Layers webinar. Victor?
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everybody, for joining us again. I'm glad that Kevin mentioned TIBCO, in his closing statement there. Some pretty exciting information if you're not familiar with the technology. From a data management point of view, if you're looking at anything like if you're trying to implement SOA or you're trying to think about MDM, they have a full MDM solution, data integration tools, data matching tools that based on your rules that you can define. All of this is based on top of an enterprise service bus, which kind of really starts to implement that SOA concept. So lots of different solutions there. They're all available a la carte, so you can start small and then build out. Yeah, just a lot of things. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head what other features you might be looking at there. If you don't have any BI tools, they have Spotfire, which is great, also integrating with this service bus. They have a free business process management, or I should say business process modeling tool. So everybody who's, used ERwin in the past and you're feeling a little bit of a pain point because VP-Win is gone, you can download their free business process modeling tool. And of course, if you ever decide to integrate with any other tools, it ties in with all of that. So yeah, some exciting offerings. I'll be talking more about this. If anyone wants to look at that free evaluation or talk to me in more detail about any of these offerings, just drop me an email after the webinar. But now we're off and running with the presentation. Today we'll be looking at design layers and how you're going to actually be modeling these complex data structures within your ERwin toolset. And do I have control of the slides here? Yes, I do. Okay, great. So our agenda for today, what are design layers? We'll look at what that really means, and then look at what design layer options actually exist inside the tool itself. A lot of users probably have seen some of these in the past or heard about them, but this has actually been around the tool for quite some time, but oftentimes users are not actually using them. So we'll kind of speak to each one of those, how you can access them, what they actually mean, different strategies for using them, reporting on your model lineage, within the context of the model manager, if you are using the model manager. If you're not, you should be. And then, of course, a demo with, actually demonstrating each one of these features and some techniques in using them. And then a Q&A at the end. So please ask your questions during the webinar, and we will get to them, as many of them as we can, at the end. So design layers. Why design layers? What does this really represent in the real world? Data structure design has evolved. It's become much more complex as years have gone forward, and the technology has evolved to complex structures that we need to be modeled within the context of the tools that we also need to use those tools to model that. It's kind of a lot of mumbo jumbo there, but basically what happens is that you have this complexity in your data that you need to have a method of seeing that lineage from one model to another, from one data structure to another. So whether you're implementing MDM, whether you have an enterprise data warehouse, if you have like a canonical model and you need to derive your models from that canonical model on demand, you need techniques of doing that. And you're already managing individual data structures. How do you either consolidate them or distribute them? Basically, you want to move from just modeling one system to modeling something like this, where you're actually seeing your data flow from many different models across many different tool sets. How do we actually define those definitions? Well, one tool you can use is the ERwin data modeling software. And what you actually have the ability of doing in there is using these concept of design layers to actually model some of what you're doing day to day within your processes. So what design layer options are available within the tool? Firstly, split model, and this is the menu here, by the way, so there's a little screenshot here of the actual menu, how you would actually access these tools, and it's just from the main menu, actions, design layers, and then you'll see the available options there. So split model, this allows you to split the model, and I'll explain that in more detail in the next slide. Deriving new models, obviously, pretty self-explanatory. You derive one model from another. Adding a model source to an existing model. Linking models. This allows you to actually take two models that have no relationship up until this point and actually build relationships between them. And the reason you want to actually build those links is so that you can use this sync with model source. And the synchronization is a tool that once you've defined the relationships between the metadata inside your model, the tool itself, ERwin, will maintain those relationships for you. There's no need to document it somewhere and then remember how to integrate your data in the future. And we'll show that in more detail as we go forward. So split model, pretty straightforward. You have a logical physical design. If anybody's been using the traditional design structure for ERwin models, you have a logical side, a physical side. You're maintaining them both within the context of one model. So you may want to have very separate designs in both. You may have one team that's primarily working on the logical design, one that's, the physical design has now significantly modified from the logical. Keeping the two in lockstep is becoming more and more complex. You actually want to break them apart. Rather than just creating a new logical model from your existing one or a physical only model from your existing one, by splitting these models, you actually have the ability of the tool will remember the relationship between the objects within the two models. So if at some later point you need to run a report to see how does one object map to the other, or if you need to actually push changes in one direction or another, if the models have evolved, you actually have the ability of doing that from within the context of the synchronization tool in ERwin. So splitting your logical and physical design allows you to maintain your separate models, and the tool by itself will maintain those links between the models. Next concept, derive model. So the derive model allows you to derive one model from any other, and in this first screenshot you see that within the context of any model you can actually derive a new model of type logical, type physical, or another combination model. You can use templates if you've been using templates up until that point. You can specify different database version, right? So this is actually one technique where you'd want to derive one model from another. Let's say you have just a logical design. You need to implement it as a SQL Server environment. You can derive a SQL Server model from that logical design. Let's say you now need to derive an Oracle design from the same logical design. You can do that as well. And once again, going back to the whole concept of the sync with model source, this internal tool, which we'll be showing in much more detail during the demo, will actually maintain the relationships from those individual physical models back to that source logical model. So that's one time you'd want to do a derivation. You want to derive like a logical model from a physical or a physical model from a logical, but maintain the relationships between those models. Another one, submodels, right? So you have an enterprise data model that you're using, but you need to publish just a subset of your accounting tables or a subset of some of your system tables for your web development team or someone who's designing a new application, and you don't necessarily need to publish them or necessarily want them to see the entire enterprise design. You can derive a model based on a subset, a subject area usually is the filter you would use, although there's many different filters you can use. But let's say you derive a model based on a subject area, publish just that subset of the model, send that out. There might be design changes just to that subset of the objects, and then once that phase of development is done, you can actually synchronize it back with your source model by using that sync with model source again. And this is just another screenshot here that shows you how you can create a filter. In this case, we're filtering on a subject area, and then we're, even with more granularity, we're selecting just an individual diagram within that subject area itself. So adding a model source. This is the next concept that is available within this concept of these design layers. And what add a model source allows you to do is to take many smaller models and build a larger one. That's one technique you can actually do. So, for example, you may have built many different models from individual reverse engineers of different schema owners. Once you've actually built those individual smaller models, you now need to build a larger model that integrates all these different systems. By taking an existing model and simply adding the other ones as sources, you can actually build that larger model. It'll be built from each one of those smaller components. And once again, ERwin internally is mapping the relationships between that larger, enterprise data model along with all the subsets that you've actually built it from. Or maybe you're trying to build a canonical model, right? So you're trying to build a canonical model from all of these different data structures you have out there. You keep integrating and integrating and integrating into this larger model. You end up with like one definition of customer that might have 40 different attributes. 20 are used in one model, 15 are used in another. Some are common across all those models, but you've built this canonical model for you to build maybe in the future. You need to build on demand. But not only that, you can actually update those definitions in that central model, and then at some point, once again, going back to that sync with model source tool, ERwin itself is maintaining the relationship between that metadata. You can push those changes out into all of those, source models. Or large models from a schema level reverse engineer. So that's kind of one example I gave. Also, enterprise data warehouse model that you may need to build from many different dimensions that you may have available, or data marts, or maybe you're just aggregating from many different source systems and you're just building that from scratch. So any of those techniques could be very useful in building that larger model from your smaller ones using the add model source. Another technique that is very useful when you want to actually use the add model source is in taking a model that may have no formatting at all. Maybe you reverse engineered a model, you've been working on it a lot, but it's just, a black and white model, very simple. You don't like the way that objects are laid out. You don't like the fonts. You don't like the behavior. There are text objects that you want to import. There are, graphical elements that you want to import from another model. You might have domains that have been previously defined, validation rules, default values, trigger definition, behavior. All of this has been defined within the context of some template. It's a model that you reuse often. But now this reverse engineered model that you just got your hands on doesn't have any of that behavior. So now you're going to have to rebuild it all. The technique you can actually use is to use the add model source and simply add the template file as a model source. And what comes in would be all the objects and behaviors that are inside that template model. So that's another technique where adding a model source is a very powerful tool. The next technique is link model source. So this is another really useful tool. Oftentimes I've actually had conversations with users that will tell me something like that they have actually had a model, they derived submodels from it, or they have enterprise level model that they have created other models from, but they have just these source system models that were reverse engineered, they were handed over to them, and they wish they could have that integration with the models the way that the derived models have, but they can't. It's like it's too late, basically. The models have been built a la carte, and there's no way of integrating those systems. So that's actually not the case. This link with model source tool actually allows you to link to unrelated models. You manually, this is a manual process, you do manually have to align the objects like you would when you're doing a complete compare, by the way. So it's basically a very similar interface that you'll be working with. And the screenshot here shows you, how we're going to try to match, I should say, entity 1 with table 1. Just a very simple example. And you can actually build that link between the two diagrams. And once you build not just on one object, on your entities, on your attributes, on your default values, et cetera, and so forth, and once you actually have defined this relationship between the objects, ERwin, once again, now simply treats them as if they're just a regular derived model. So just like you would do with all your other diagrams, you could actually not only trace that model lineage from one model to another and the entities within them, but you can also synchronize back to that source. And then, of course, this all leads to this sync with model source, which once again, whenever you invoke sync with model source and you, get into the editor, like we see in this screenshot, once again, very similar to what you've seen in Complete Compare. If you've ever used ERwin before, you're seeing the Complete Compare features, and you actually have the ability of, ignoring certain properties. Like maybe, for example, you always know that your physical names are going to be out of sync. You can ignore those just like you can in Complete Compare. But maybe you want to keep your data types in sync. You want to keep other properties, your definitions, for example. And this is all done within the context of the sync with model source tool. And what it allows you to do is, to maintain that relationship that you've built either from deriving models or from linking them after the fact, or from adding also. So that's the other one, adding a model source to another existing model. And then model lineage reporting. So if you are using the model manager, and really there's, if you have multiple users, even when you have individual users, there's value in using the model manager for version control and to delegate, processes during your development phase, or development phases, I should say. But so even with individual users, but definitely with multiple users, you want to be able to share your standards, you want to be able to share template files, best practices, etc. You want to be able to be using the model manager. So if you do use the model manager, you have this really nice ability of creating a report on model lineage, which will actually show you the relationship between your models, the data flow from one model to another. So there's another valuable reason to have that. I actually have a blog posting with a query that is actually a cleaner version of the query we see in the exercise we're going to do here today. And if you are curious about that in much more detail, go to my blog, maximumdatamodeling.blogspot.com, or just Google search for maximum data modeling, and I'll be the topmost link. And you'll find an article on this within my blog as well. And we'll actually show the report here, but like I said, check out that blog and you'll see much more detail on what's going on under the covers. So let's go and do a demo and show each one of these different features in the context of the ERwin software itself. Let me just share my desktop. Okay, so I think everybody should be seeing my desktop now. And so let's take a look at each one of these in detail. So first of all, split model. So let's take a look at how we can actually, what actually that entails. And I'm getting an error message here on, okay. I've been having that error message all day long, and I'm not sure what application is returning that. I think it's one of my database services. So back to the presentation, though. So first of all, let's take a look at splitting model and where you would actually want to implement that. So here we have a very small diagram. We have a logical design with these nice logical names, and we also have our physical design with our abbreviated names. So it's a very, very simple model, but it will show us what we're trying to do in the concept of breaking apart these logical to physical design. So we invoke this from our actions, design layers, and we're going to do a split model. And you'll see the first thing, it'll just basically take the model name and it will, it put this logical suffix on it here. And you can either use this name or you can modify it. I'm going to use the default for now. And you'll see you'll immediately prompt it for physical as well, and it does the same thing. It takes your existing model name, it just puts this physical suffix on it, and you can either accept this name or modify it if you'd like to change the naming standard. And now what actually you see here in the upper part of the pane here that this is actually my physical design. Let me zoom out a little to show you a little more of the screen. And there's only physical only. I can't toggle to the physical side. This is actually split the model in half. And I can actually go to my logical design. And here's these logical design changes here. Now the nice thing about it is that we've done this derivation, but if I go to my model sources, we'll see here that the tool, ERwin itself, is remembering that the logical model is the parent model to this model. So if I do come here and make a change to a data type, for example, and I'll just make a minor change here, just to illustrate a point, I can always go to my actions, design layers, and I can do my sync with model source. It will once again remember the source model is the logical design. And we'll see in our result set that we have report on differences in the diagram. So of course the name is different. We are expecting to see that, so that's not too surprising. Names on these columns are different too, and we can actually filter that out of our comparison. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to back out all the way. Do a sync with model source again, and go to my type selection, and I will ignore my table physical names and my column physical names. And let's do the synchronization now. And we'll see, for example, that the difference now on this table is that the data type has changed. So much fewer differences here. And if we go down to that column again, oh, which I lost. Here we go. Employee identification number, which we once again know that the physical name is a difference, so that's why it's not appearing as a difference here. But what is being reported as a difference is the difference in the data type. So now I can actually accept to either push this into the logical or physical design. Now the key takeaway from all of this is that if you're making changes across them, even though the objects have different names, etc., they will synchronize here, or be identified here within the tool. Now what differentiates this from like a complete compare? It's the naming, right? So if you've ever attempted to do something like this, if you've split models apart and you use the complete compare, you've probably noticed that, of course, it's very painstaking because ERwin's going to try to use the names to align those objects. The names don't match up. Everything shows as a difference. And by doing this derivation, by splitting the model apart, you can have two separate designs. You know, they don't have to be constantly bumping up against each other. Your logical team can do the logical changes. Physical team can make their physical changes. And then at some later point, you can do a synchronization when that time becomes, becomes essential to do something with synchronizing your two designs. So that is the split model sample. Pretty straightforward. This is one of the simplest examples you can give, obviously. And let's take a look at another exercise here. I'm just going to clean up my desktop here to simplify things. Next one I want to look at is doing a derived model. So let's open up a little sample model I have here. Derived sample. Let's take a look at what we have here. So this is a relatively small model, but it's still here to illustrate a point. If I go to the main subject area and I zoom out, you can see that there's a decent amount of complexity here. I mean, I'm sure you have more complicated models than this, but it kind of makes a point that this is like there's a rather complicated structure that's being defined here. And some of this is proprietary, so I'm not going to go into too much detail zooming in. But I am going to show you that I have built just my audit tables in a separate subject area. So we have some audit tables here. We have a structure. We have data flow within the context of this. These are just the table definitions themselves. Of course, if I wanted to look at the attributes, I always can look at my attribute breakdown as well. But in this case, we're just, for the purposes of the exercise, we're just going to look at the table definitions. So we have our table definitions here, and we want to actually derive just this subset of models of the model for some design changes or for publication or to share with other team members who need access to this metadata. Maybe they're using it for an ETL process, maybe they need it for reporting purposes or to build reports. So how do we export just a subset of our model? Once again, we go to our actions, design layers, and we do derive new model. So I'm deriving a model, and what you'll see is that you actually have the ability of, oh, something weird on my display there. Derive new model. Oh, still weird. Okay, and but this is not the way it's going to look there, but unfortunately it looks like the something on the share is giving me a strange display here on the on my dialog box. But what we'll have here is you actually have the ability of deriving a model. So you could derive a new model based on up here you would actually specify logical physical or logical physical, which is boxed out for some reason in this particular display. And then you can actually do a derive. You can include template files if you've used templates in the past. If you're using your model manager, you can connect to your model manager to use templates from there. You can actually derive based on different databases if that happens to be the case. And then this is just for UDP, conflict resolution. That's a standard dialog that comes up. You just accept those changes if you get that dialog box. And then you can actually specify whether you want to include just logical level objects, physical level objects, or just even database level objects alone. And you actually have the same granularity you would have like in complete compare, for example, as to what you want to include or exclude in this option set. You can save this, by the way, if you've you've seen in the past. You can do this in the context of complete compare, reverse engineer, forward engineer, rather than building these over and over and over again. If you've actually customized an option set, make sure to save it so you can use it again in the future, and you can just save it from right here. So now, more importantly, object selection. So what I actually have the ability of doing here is I can actually just select audit tables, and you'll notice that automatically, if I look at my list of all my tables, I see only the subset of the tables, the ones that are in that subject area. And you can even have, other granularity. You can like include or exclude table spaces, for example, other properties like that as well. So a lot of granularity here on what you want to include or exclude, and then you can do your derive. So when the derive is complete, you'll actually notice that you have no diagram. Now, the reason that this is the case is because I've actually excluded the tables, but I didn't include any of the graphical components. So that's easy enough to resolve. I can just create a new diagram, and in my properties, I'll just simply include everybody. And then, let's try the tree layout and see how that looks. So here are the tables, just the ones that I included in that subject area. And I have it as a submodel. Now, the nice thing once again, is that once I've actually made changes to this design, if I ever needed to make changes, or maybe I've made changes to the original design itself, and I want to actually push those changes into this submodel, once again, in your model, you have your model sources defined, and you'll notice, just like we saw before, that the original model source is actually located here. I could just click the sync button at any time and do a synchronization. If I want to use a name mapping file to map values across the two models, maybe from a logical to physical or even between two different systems, you can use a name mapping file here as an interface through the synchronization. So, pretty robust tool if you want to maintain the relationships across multiple designs. So that is the example here with the derived model. And I was trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to really point out here on this particular exercise. I think that's it for now. I'll keep it open in case we want to cut back and touch on that in some more detail. But that is probably the most frequently used of all the design layer options, is the ability of deriving one model from another. So the next one is add a model source. So let's take a look at an exercise around that. So we have here is I actually have two models here. One is, and I'll open them briefly just to show you what they are. This is actually a star schema built around this fact table, and this is from an SAP BW design. So you have the demo cube fact table here. We see its dimensions, and we have a logical and physical side of our design here in a model. I also happen to have, and I'm going to close this down because I don't need it right now. I'll show you in more detail. We'll use that again in just a moment. But I also have a, let me go back, a snowflake. So it's the same fact table. It's a snowflake related to it. And we see much more complexity here, of course. So what you actually can do is you can actually merge these two diagrams together. So I actually have this demo snowflake subject area. I've already built the subject area in my model, and I can just use like a orthogonal layout here to take a look at it. If I zoom out, actually let me use a symmetric layout, which gives me more of that snowflake design that I'm looking for. And if you haven't played with these auto layout features in ERwin, really powerful stuff. As you can see here, I could do like a hierarchical display. I can do a symmetric layout. So pretty powerful, you know, to try playing around with many different option sets. If you haven't done that before, use the layout options to kind of show some value to your data or show the data flow of your data. So here is my snowflake for a similar design. It's actually the same core fact table. So what I've done is I actually took this design, I built a subject area called demo snowflake, and let me save it. And I take that original demo star as well. And here's my demo cube, and let me just do the same thing. I'm going to do a symmetric layout again. I'm going to save that as well. So I have two models. So some of these objects are new. Some of these objects are shared across multiple diagrams. So what I'm going to start with, I'm going to actually take a new, I'll save that. Okay. I'll just minimize that. Okay, so I actually am going to take a new blank diagram. Let me just make sure that my star schema is an Oracle model. Okay. So I'm going to create a new blank model, an Oracle model, and it basically has no object at this point at all. It's just a completely blank model. So I'm going to go to my actions, design layers. I'm going to add model source. And the model source I'm going to add is the star schema here. And we see there's the objects from my star schema. And I will now go and I will use my actions, design layers, add model source, and I'm going to load the snowflake. And I'm just going to, you can once again filter on objects, et cetera, and so forth, just like you would expect to see in these editors before. You have your type selection, object selection, naming standards, et cetera. In this case, I'm just adding them all using the defaults. You can always apply naming standards or any of these other behaviors after the fact, so there's no reason to do it immediately. And here we go. So if I zoom out here, this is now remember, this is that blank model that I had. And you see the color standards are different here, but here's my snowflake. Now the nice feature about this is if I go into the cube, I see that subset of objects. If I go to the snowflake, I see this subset of objects. And you'll notice something interesting, that if I go to my Model Explorer, that if I look for my fact table, for example, find it. There it is. Here's the demo cube fact table, which is kind of where the central table for all of this. But you'll notice that I don't have duplicates. I only have one. So what's happened is that ERwin has been actually taking the models and integrated them. You know, when the objects are the same, when they match, they actually get merged into one object within this larger model. So what's the value here? I'll tell you, for example, that I actually have a LinkedIn post on this that someone actually asked me about, and it's actually a consultation that I've given in the past where someone actually needed to build a larger model from all of their universe files from business objects. So they actually took each one of the universes, and what they did was they took each one of those models, they imported them into ERwin. It built a model that had just those universe objects inside of it. We built a subject area with the universe name in it, and then we all just started adding them into this larger enterprise model. And when they ended up with, which is exactly what they were hoping to see, which was one subject area for each one of their universes, and then the main subject area containing all the related objects. So very powerful tool. And the nice thing about it is not only have you now added those, but now you can actually maintain the design in the smaller models. And then, once again, using the sync with model source, synchronizing those changes back into your source models. So a very powerful tool, and you can imagine how you can start building, you know, that canonical model you've been trying to build for a while, or you're trying to build, you know, a snowflake from many different objects you have out there, many different mark definitions you have, and then you want to start building those larger super objects from those subset of those objects. So you can imagine, like, you know, whether it's material definition or product definition or customer definition or whatever you need to, very useful if you're starting to implement MDM or SOA or anything like that. So hopefully you see the value in this. I find it really powerful. I've used it many, many times before. It's very common that you need to build a larger model from smaller models. It could just be from multiple schema designs, or it could just be picking a la carte. You have two different designs that have common objects that are just, logical designs, but they have pieces that you need for a larger design. You can merge them together by using this add model source. So I'm going to close that model down. And we're going to look at the next exercise is going to be around the link model source. So I have a few different ones here. For this one, let's take a look at our staging for Teradata. So it's a very simple example of where you might want to do this. You may have a staging area for your data warehouse. So here's our customer master information. We want to merge this together before we push it into our data warehouse. But we have multiple different source systems. We have Oracle source systems, we have SQL Server, and they're all coming into the staging area to be cleansed. So how do I actually represent the relationship between those systems? I have models of all of them. How do I actually synchronize them one to the other? So what I can actually do is, once again, I go to my actions, design layers, and I can link model source, and then I can actually load one of the diagram objects. So let's say that I want to actually use my Oracle source. I thought I had upgraded this. That's okay. Let me just upgrade it quickly. There we go. It's upgraded. So now I have the Oracle model here available. And once again, like we've seen before, if you've ever seen Complete Compare, you've already dealt with these editors before. You can do logical level, physical level, database level compare. In this case, I'll just do database level. You can include or exclude objects, like maybe I don't care about my, maybe I only care about my table definitions, and I don't care about my default values, etc. And once again, you can actually filter based on subject areas if you have them. You can include or exclude tables. In this case, we only have one table, so pretty straightforward. And you can apply naming standards. In this case, there's no naming standards on this matching. But this is very similar to what you've seen in your Complete Compare. I could just click Finish at any time. And let's take a look at what we have here. We'll notice this is very similar to what we've seen in Complete Compare, that we have our client table, we have customer master. These are actually the related objects, but they're misaligned in our this editor here. So the technique is we select one, we click on the Match tool, and we're matching it with the customer master. Do you want to match them? Yes, I do. And then we can actually go through the attributes as well and align these as well. Oop, I missed that one. So there's indexes as well. I could ignore these, and there's only an index on one side of these anyway, but it doesn't really matter in the context of what we're doing. I can actually mark that as a known difference, and it disappears from my list. So we've aligned these objects, and we'll notice that beyond their physical names, they also have different settings, like this is a primary key member. This data type is different. So I've created the alignment on the objects, and that's all I'm going to do for now. I can actually just finish. Yes, I'll mark that as a snapshot. That's fine. And OK. So I've actually created this. So what's the value in doing that? The value in it is that at some later point, once again, we have our model sources, and it identifies this Oracle as a source model. And at any time, I can do a synchronization. Oh, I forgot to save my model. Oh, actually, no, I did save it. So the model is synchronized. I'm seeing default values because I didn't exclude them in that my option set. But I am seeing the tables are now aligned, you'll notice. and that, the columns are all aligned with each other. So I can actually go down here and like now, maybe there's a demand that we need to, in our staging area, we need to make this a varchar 40 to allow us to, import these string values. So I can do that here. These nullable values here, I'll leave that as it is. Once again, here we go. Our first name might need to be expanded because, we have varchar 11, so staging area might need more space there. And similarly here as well. So we can see that, you have the ability of synchronizing those models. And once again, you don't have to go and manually align these objects over and over and over again. When you go back in there, ERwin, you've built the links that first time. ERwin will allow you to, maintain those links across the multiple models. And that's the key feature is multiple models, right? So I've done this with one, and we have this one Oracle staging area diagram. And okay, we're done with that for now. Let me go to my tools, actions, design layers, and we're going to do a sync with model source. And I'm actually going to add another source here. Oh, I'm in the wrong model. I want to do a link model source. And once again, I'm going to load my SQL Server source system here. I'll do an upgrade on the model. And now I have a SQL Server 2005 here as well. Type selection, I will this time filter out those objects. Let's just do let's do database level and only table definitions. And let's finish. So we have a similar behavior as we saw before. Here's my customer and my customer master. I'm going to align these. And at the column level, okay, address is already aligned. Let's align these here. First name, let's do an alignment here. Last name, oops. That's a known difference. And now when I actually go to my model sources, we'll see that the SQL Server and the Oracle model are both available. So you can imagine having many different sources, and you're mapping them all here within the context of the tool. So a very powerful tool to have, to be able to have all those different source systems mapping here and to synchronize them, right? So you make your changes into your source system. You can propagate them down into those source systems, or I should say into your target system. You can propagate them down to your source systems. Or vice versa, like we saw in this case, our data types in the staging area may not actually contain the values that are defined within the source systems. We need to integrate them across there. So, hopefully that kind of shows you the value of that. It's a very powerful tool to have to be able to link those models one to the other. Even if you're not actually going to be pushing physical changes in either direction, just being able to define the relationships between those objects gives you a lot of value when you go to run reports. And let's take a look at the reporting features. So I actually do have my model manager. Let me connect to it first. Hopefully the service is available, and I won't have any issues. There it is. Good. And now since I am using my model manager for my tools, Mart reports, diagram reports, is it diagram or global reports? Global reports, I have derived models. And this is going to run in Crystal Reports, so it just does take a minute for Crystal to open up. And by the way, once again, this Crystal Reports is bundled in with your ERwin install. So you'll be able to run these reports. You don't need to install Crystal if you don't have it currently. But it does take a minute to run, and my model manager is pretty big, so it does take a little bit of time to generate the report. But here it comes. Drum roll. Oh, why is this coming up now? It's strange. This happened during the last webinar too. So I need to specify. Oh, hold on a second. There we go. Okay, I don't know why that came up, to be honest with you. I think it's something with WebEx. This only happens when I do the demos. It's strange, but regardless. But okay, so here we have the resulting report. And what we see here is we actually see our source model and derived model, and then the actual relationship, like what model, what's the actual path to that object. You'll notice the model manager has, it'll have this long path name here, which is not really the easiest to read, has a library ID and model ID and then the version number. So that's actually probably more information than you need. But if you do go to my blog, by the way, I have a query that cleans this all up, so it gives you a much cleaner report. If you want to run that one rather than this canned report, it'll give you a good result. But the value here is that it's showing that, by using the repository, you actually have a central place to run these reports to actually see how your models relate one to the other. And as a matter of fact, I'll tease you with some information that is probably whispered about as it is, but there is a tool that's coming in the near future from CA that would kind of take advantage of this, the model manager metadata itself to allow you to do this kind of reporting. So you can actually see, not only the metadata in this graphical or textual report, like I said here, but actually like a graphical reporting that shows model lineage from one to another, actually tracking data, attributes, definitions from one model to another model, from one tool to another. So that's in the future, but you can only really take advantage of that if you are using the model manager. So definitely, if you have multiple modelers and you want to take advantage of this, think about upgrading to the model manager or the workgroup edition as it's called now. So, and that's what I want to show you here in the context of the reporting. Like I said, if you're curious about reporting features in the context of model lineage, check out my blog. There's an article there about it. And I think that's my last demo. There's quite a few demos there. And I'll open it up to any questions we might have. And hopefully we have a few. And while we wait for those questions to be compiled, I am going to just do a quick recap. So in conclusion, documenting your complex data structures and relationships requires tools that can define and manage them. So we need methods of actually reporting and defining these relationships and reporting on them.
One question is, Tracy would like you to share the URL for your blog.
Okay. Okay, yeah, let me, these are my URLs. If you just do a Google search in groups, look for maximum data modeling, it's 3 words, or on Twitter, max data modeling, or on Blogspot, maximumdatamodeling.blogspot.com. Once again, if you just do a Google search for maximum data modeling, probably the first 3 links you'll find will be these 3. So pretty quick way to access that information.
One more is, do you have to have model manager to do lineage reporting?
Yes, for the most part you do. There are techniques where you can use the API to, you can actually generate a report in the context of an individual diagram, and that individual diagram will show you like what source systems are mapped to that one diagram. But the real value comes from seeing, many different diagrams within a shared repository and the relationships between them. And that part of it is only really going to be available from the context of the model manager.
Okay. Next question is, how is add a model source different from the merge, complete, compare we had in a previous version?
The issue with complete compare is that if you derive the model and then you do a complete compare after the fact, complete compare is going to assume that 2 different tables with 2 different names are 2 unrelated objects. When you use the add model source or link model source or any of these techniques basically, because they're all going to give you the same result in the end, it allows you to have 2 very different looking objects. Like you may have 2 tables that have completely different names. One has 25 columns, one has 15 columns. But when you do the synchronization using the sync tool, it'll remember these 2 tables with different names are related to each other. They're actually the same parent object generated both of them. And these 10 columns in the context of those 25 columns are actually related one to the other. So that's something that complete compare, you basically have to do this manually over and over again using complete compare as opposed to using the synchronization tools.
Okay. Please go over how you can add model from universe sources.
Okay, if you're really curious about that, that's going to take a lot of explaining. You use there's a tool in ERwin. You go from your file import from external data sources, and there's a meta integration bridge that comes built into ERwin. It's free. If you want a lot more detail on that, I will take down your information. I'll send you an email. But basically, there's a webinar on the ERwin.com page that walks through the whole process step by step. It's about 45 minutes. I'll send you the link to that. I'll post it on my LinkedIn group afterwards. So whoever asked this question, I'll send it directly to you, but I'll also post it on my LinkedIn group if anybody's curious for that link after the webinar.
Okay, seems like deriving models is available on ERwin 7. What feature that you demoed is new to ERwin 8?
This is all available in 7. There's some minor tweaks to the way the tool works, but that's really just the cosmetic. The functionality-wise, this is all available in 7. You can add model sources, you can derive models, you can do synchronization. All of this is available in your 7.x releases as well. There's no reason to upgrade to 8 just for this feature set.
Okay, unrelated, has there been a service pack yet to ERwin 8?
Yes, there's 8.1. Once again, check out my blog. Probably most of the big pain points with the 8.0 release have been resolved in the 8.1 release, which is available now. And if you go to my blog, I have an article with all the new features in 8.1. Check it out. If you think that that's worth the upgrade, and I guarantee you, you're going to want to do an upgrade once you read the article. Or you could just upgrade, but it's definitely worth the upgrade.
Okay. Next question. Is there any linkage to TIBCO business process modeler?
Not directly. The method is that you can use the meta integration bridge. That's, once again, that same tool that I mentioned before from file, import, and export from external file source is available there. You can export and import XSD, and business process, the TIBCO tool will export XSD files, and then you can import them into ERwin. And then you can export them as well, so it's bidirectional via, it's just a standard file, but it works, basically.
In model links, can we show logic describing how data is converted from schema A to schema B? Not all links are one-to-one.
Now, within the context of the tool, it is a one-to-one mapping. So that tool itself is a one-to-one mapping. Within the context of ERwin, and there's another webinar that I did on data warehousing and ERwin, and there's a separate tool in ERwin that allows you that in an attribute definition, you can actually capture the transformation logic inside of there as a rule, and you can have multiple sources defined there, so you can have like 2 columns merging into one or something like that. So that is available. It's a separate tool. It's not the tool I was introducing today, but you can use the two in conjunction. If you're curious about that, we have a previous webinar in the same series on data warehousing, and it kind of walks you through that process.
Okay, and just step back, where can we download the ERwin 8.1 patch?
If you go to ERwin.com, from the main menu, go to support. Right at the top of the page, if you go to ERwin.com, go to support, click on the topmost link, which is the support page link. It'll take you to the URL, which is like support.com/ERwin_support, something like that. But just, you can navigate to it right from ERwin.com. And when you get there, there'll be some options at the bottom of the screen from the pull-down menu. And the topmost link is downloads and patches, and you can get the full download from that link. Okay,
and it looks like last question. Does anyone use the linking models to capture ETL specs? Is it practical for that?
You use it in conjunction. Once again, if you want to, if anybody wants to reference back on that webinar, maybe I'll post that link as well. Again, I did a webinar previously. You can actually document your data sources and your transformation logic in the context of ERwin. There's also a white paper on it on the ERwin.com website. Maybe I'll post that as well. But what it allows you to do is you would use these in conjunction. So one, you could actually map the models one-to-one using these tools that I'm mentioning today. And then in conjunction with that, at the column level, you can actually capture the ETL definition there as well. It's just text. It's not like programmatic, but it does allow you to, put the definitions with with the models themselves. So it's a convenient place to store all that information. I think that's the last question. So thanks for attending, and back to you, Kevin.
All right, like Victor said, thank you for attending. Please look out for our invites coming on the next ERwin webinar and also on our upcoming TIBCO webinar in September. Thanks and have a great afternoon.